Danny Carter stepped off the transport ship and took his first breath of recycled air. The Interstellar Academy stretched before him like a small city floating in space. Glass towers reached toward artificial skis. Gardens filled with plants from 100 different worlds lined the walkways. Thousands of students from dozens of alien species moved through the corridors, speaking languages Danny had only heard in recordings. He was 22 years old. He was the first human to ever study here, and he was completely alone. A small robot floated toward him and projected a map in the air. It beeped twice and started moving, expecting him to follow. Danny grabbed his bag and walked after it, trying not to stare at the creatures around him. There were tall beings with scales that shifted colors when they moved, short creatures with too many eyes, floating entities that seemed to be made of light and sound. Each one glanced at Danny as he passed, and he saw the same expression on every face. Curiosity mixed with something else, something that looked a lot like pity. Danny knew why they looked at him that way. Earth had been discovered by the galactic community only 15 years ago. When the first alien scientists visited his planet, they had been horrified. They called Earth a Class 12, which meant it was one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. The gravity was crushing compared to most civilized worlds. The weather could kill in minutes. Diseases evolved faster than medicine could keep up. Predators hunted in every environment. Even the plants were dangerous. The scientists had wondered how any intelligent life could develop on such a world. They had expected to find humans living in fear, barely surviving. Instead, they found cities, highways, airplanes, nuclear weapons. Humans had not just survived on their deadly planet, they had conquered it. But that did not mean the galaxy respected them. To most species, humans were still primitives. Interesting, perhaps, but not equals. Danny's room was small but clean. 2 beds, 2 desks, a window that showed the stars outside. His roommate was already there when he arrived. Was one of the species that had founded the academy thousands of years ago. He was thin and pale, with large dark eyes and fingers that were too long. He looked at Danny the way someone might look at a stray animal that had wandered into their home. "You are the human," said. It was not a question. "Danny Carter," Danny said, holding out his hand, looked at it without understanding. Danny lowered his hand. "Nice to meet you." "I have read about your species," said. "Your planet sounds unpleasant." "It has its moments," Danny said. He put his bag on the empty bed and started unpacking. "But it's home." Watched him for a moment, then turned back to his screen without another word. Danny understood. He was a curiosity, nothing more. He would have to earn respect here if he could earn it at all. The first weeks were hard. Danny attended lectures on xenobiology, galactic history, and diplomacy. He understood about half of what was being taught. The other students had been preparing for this academy their entire lives. Danny had learned about alien life from textbooks that were already outdated by the time they were printed. He ate alone in the commissary. The food was strange but edible. He learned which dishes would make him sick and which ones were safe. He learned to ignore the whispers that followed him everywhere. I heard his planet has animals that eat their own young. How is he even alive?" Danny kept his head down and focused on his studies. He had not come here to make friends. He had come here to prove that humans belonged among the stars. But not everyone was content to simply ignore him. Was a species known for their political power and physical strength. He was tall even by alien standards, with dark green scales and eyes like yellow fire. His family controlled mining operations across 3 star systems. He had grown up being told he was superior to everyone around him, and he did not like sharing his academy with a primitive from a death planet. It started with small things. Would bump into Danny in the hallways, knocking his supplies to the floor. He would make comments in the commissary, loud enough for everyone to hear. He would laugh at Danny's questions in class, mocking his accent and his lack of knowledge. Danny ignored it. He had dealt with bullies before. Back in Montana, where he grew up, there had been boys who thought they were tough because their fathers owned land. Danny had learned to let their words pass through him like wind through grass, but was not satisfied with words. One night, Danny returned to his room to find his belongings scattered across the floor. His clothes had been torn. His tablet had been cracked. Someone had written a word on his wall in a language he did not understand, but he could guess what it meant. Was sitting on his bed, pretending to study. He did not look up when Danny entered. "Did you see who did this?" Danny asked. "No," said. His voice was flat. Danny knew he was lying, but he also knew that was afraid. Family was powerful. No one wanted to make them angry. Danny cleaned up the mess without another word. He fixed what he could and threw away what he could not. He did not report the incident to the academy authorities. He knew it would only make things worse. That night he lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The stars outside his window were beautiful, but they felt very far away. He thought about home. He thought about the mountains of Montana, the smell of pine trees, the sound of rivers running over rocks. He thought about his mother's cooking and his father's quiet strength. He thought about all the times he had wanted to give up and had not. Danny Carter had grown up on a. He had survived winters that froze the ground solid. He had survived summers that burned the grass brown. He had survived getting lost in the wilderness for 3 days with nothing but a knife and his wits. He had survived everything his planet had thrown at him. He would survive this too. What did not understand, what none of them understood, was that Danny was not afraid of hardship. He had been shaped by it. Every challenge he faced only made him stronger. Every obstacle only made him more determined. The alien bully thought he was tormenting a weak and helpless creature. He had no idea what he was really dealing with. The academy held survival training exercises twice each year. Every student was required to participate. The exercises took place in a massive dome on the far side of the station, where advanced technology could create almost any environment from any planet in the galaxy. For this exercise, the dome had been transformed into a jungle. Thick trees grew from artificial soil. Vines hung from branches. Small streams cut through the undergrowth. The air was warm and wet. Strange sounds echoed from hidden speakers, creating the illusion that dangerous creatures lurked in every shadow. To Danny, it looked like a vacation. The students were divided into teams of 4 and dropped at different points around the dome. They were given basic supplies, a communication beacon, and 72 hours to navigate to the extraction point. The instructors monitored everything from a control room, watching through thousands of hidden cameras. Danny was assigned to a team with 3 students. They looked at him with nervous eyes as the transport pod descended into the jungle. None of them wanted to be stuck with the human. None of them thought he would be useful. "Just stay close and try not to slow us down," one of them said. Her name was, and she seemed to be the leader. "This environment is from Prime. It's dangerous for species like yours." Danny did not argue. He simply nodded and followed them into the trees. The first hour went smoothly. They moved carefully through the jungle, using their tablets to navigate. They avoided the water because they had been told it might contain parasites. They avoided the shadows because they had been told predators might be hiding there. They followed every rule they had learned in class. Danny watched and said nothing. He noticed things they missed. The way certain plants grew toward light meant there was a clearing nearby. The pattern of animal tracks in the mud showed which paths were safe. The sound of insects told him where water was clean and where it was stagnant. But before he could share any of this, everything changed. They walked into a small clearing and was waiting for them. He was not alone. 3 of his companions stood behind him, their scales dark in the filtered light. They were supposed to be on the other side of the dome with their own team. They had clearly left their assigned route to find Danny. "Look what we found," said. His voice was like gravel scraping against stone. The little playing survival games. Stepped forward. This is against the rules. You're supposed to be with your own team. Rules are for lesser species, said. He did not even look at her. His yellow eyes were fixed on Danny. I want to see how the human survives when things get difficult. Before anyone could react, companions grabbed Danny. They were fast and strong. Danny struggled, but there were too many of them. They took his supply pack. They crushed his communication beacon under their feet. They dragged him to the edge of a steep ravine that cut through the jungle floor. Stop this, said. Her voice shook with fear. You could kill him. His species is supposed to be tough, said. Let's find out if that's true. He pushed Danny over the edge. Danny fell through branches and vines, crashing through undergrowth until he hit the bottom of the ravine. Pain exploded through his body. He lay still for a moment, staring up at the canopy far above. He could hear laughing. Good luck, they called down. Try not to die too quickly. Then they were gone. Danny lay in the mud and took a breath, then another. He moved his arms and legs slowly, checking for broken bones. His left shoulder burned where he had hit a rock. His ribs ached, but nothing was broken. Nothing was damaged beyond repair. He sat up and looked around. He was alone at the bottom of a ravine in a simulated jungle. He had no food, no water, no supplies, no way to call for help. The extraction point was somewhere on the other side of the dome, and he had 72 hours to get there. Danny smiled. This was nothing. Back home, he had once gotten lost in the Rocky Mountains during a snowstorm. He had survived for 3 days with nothing but the clothes on his back and a pocket knife. He had eaten pine bark and melted snow for water. He had built a shelter from fallen branches and waited for the storm to pass. Compared to that, this jungle was easy. He stood up and started moving. The first thing he needed was water. He listened to the sounds around him and followed the buzz of insects until he found a small stream. He cupped his hands and drank. The water was cool and clean. His body relaxed as the liquid moved through him. Next, he needed tools. He found a stone with a sharp edge and used it to cut a branch from a nearby tree. He sharpened one end into a point, creating a simple spear. He found vines that were strong enough to use as rope. He gathered large leaves that could serve as containers. By the time the artificial sun began to set, Danny had built a shelter. It was simple but sturdy, made from branches leaned against a fallen log and covered with leaves to keep out the rain. He had started a fire using a method his father had taught him years ago, rubbing a stick against dry wood until sparks flew. The smoke rose into the air, warm and familiar. The monitoring staff in the control room watched in silence. They had seen students from 100 different worlds attempt these exercises. Most of them panicked when things went wrong. Most of them waited for rescue. Most of them could barely start a fire with the equipment they were given. This human had been stripped of everything and left for dead, and he was thriving. What is he doing now? One of the instructors asked. On the screen, Danny was crouched near the stream. He had fashioned a simple trap from sticks and vines. As they watched, a small creature wandered into the trap. Danny moved quickly, killing it with a single strike of his spear. Within minutes, he was cooking meat over his fire. Impossible, another instructor whispered. That's a level 3 predator. Our simulations are designed to avoid direct confrontation. It didn't avoid him, the first instructor said. He hunted it. In the jungle, Danny ate his meal and stared into the flames. He thought about his friends. He thought about how scared they must have been to attack him like that. He thought about what would happen when this was over. But mostly, he thought about the other students in the dome. The ones who were not built for this kind of world. The ones who were probably struggling right now, scared and alone in the darkness. Danny finished his food and put out his fire. He covered the coals with dirt and stood up. The night was dark around him, but his eyes had adjusted. He could see the shapes of trees. He could hear the sounds of the jungle. He could feel the direction of the wind. He was not going to wait for rescue. He was not going to hide until the exercise was over. He was going to find the others. And he was going to bring them home. Danny moved through the jungle like a ghost. His feet found the quiet places between roots and rocks. His eyes scanned the darkness for movement. His ears listened for sounds that did not belong. He had learned these skills as a child, hunting deer with his father in the forests of Montana. He had never imagined he would use them on a space station millions of miles from home. The first group he found was lost near a river crossing. 4 students huddled together on a narrow strip of land, surrounded by rising water. A flash flood had caught them by surprise, and now they were trapped. The current was too strong for their thin bodies. They could not swim. They could only wait and hope that someone would come. Danny appeared on the opposite bank like a shadow stepping out of the trees. They stared at him with wide eyes. They recognized him as the human, the one everyone whispered about. The one had tried to kill. "Stay there," Danny called across the water. "I'm coming to get you." "You can't," one of them shouted back. "The current is too strong, you'll drown." Danny did not answer. He walked upstream until he found a place where the river narrowed. He cut a long vine from a tree and tied one end around his waist. He tied the other end to a thick branch stuck firmly in the ground. Then he stepped into the water. The current hit him like a fist. It tried to pull him under to sweep him away. But Danny had grown up swimming in mountain rivers. He knew how to angle his body against the flow. He knew how to find footing on slippery rocks. He pushed forward, step by step, until he reached the other side. They watched in disbelief as he climbed onto their small island. He was breathing hard and his clothes were soaked, but he was smiling. "Everyone grab the vine," he said. "We're going to cross together. Stay behind me and don't let go." They did as he said. Danny led them into the water, his body breaking the current so they could follow in his wake. One of them slipped and nearly fell, but Danny caught her arm and held her steady. Step by step, they crossed the river. When they reached the other side, they collapsed on the bank, gasping and shivering. "How did you do that?" one of them asked. "Practice," Danny said. "Come on, we need to find shelter before it gets colder." Word spread through the jungle faster than Danny expected. The monitoring system tracked every student, and the instructors could not help but share what they were seeing. The human was moving through the dome like he owned it. He was finding lost students and bringing them together. He was teaching them how to survive. By the second day, Danny had gathered 11 students from 4 different species. He led them to a clearing where he had already built a camp. There were shelters made from branches and leaves. There was a fire pit with warm coals. There were containers filled with clean water and food he had gathered from the jungle. The students stared at the camp like it was a miracle. "This is amazing," said a named Pell. He was small and covered in soft fur, with eyes that reflected light like mirrors. "How did you build all this alone?" "It's not that hard," Danny said. "The jungle gives you everything you need. You just have to know what to look for." He taught them. He showed them which plants were safe to eat and which ones were poison. He showed them how to find water by following animal tracks. He showed them how to make fire, how to build shelter, how to move quietly through the trees. They listened with attention they had never shown in any classroom. On the second night, 2 more students stumbled into camp. They were part of his original team. Their scales were dull and cracked from dehydration. Their eyes were wide with fear. They had gotten separated from and his group, and they had been wandering lost ever since. The other students looked at Danny, waiting to see what he would do. Everyone knew who these students were. Everyone knew they had helped push Danny into the ravine. Danny walked over to them and held out a container of water. "Drink," he said, "then sit by the fire and rest." One of them looked at him with confusion. "Why are you helping us? We tried to hurt you." "You're scared and lost," Danny said. "That's enough for now. We can talk about the rest later." They took the water and drank deeply. They joined the others by the fire, sitting apart from the group but no longer alone. Danny went back to tending the flames, acting like nothing unusual had happened. Pell moved closer to Danny and spoke quietly. "I don't understand you. They could have killed you. Don't you want revenge?" Danny thought about the question for a moment. "Where I come from, we have a saying. You don't kick someone when they're down. They made a mistake, but they're not my enemies. They're just kids who got in over their heads." "You're also a kid," Pell said. Danny smiled. "I grew up on it. I stopped being a kid a long time ago." On the third day, Danny found. The leader was huddled in a small cave with his last remaining companion. They had run out of food on the first day. Their water supply had been contaminated. Something had been stalking them through the jungle, and they had not slept in 2 nights. Scales had turned a sickly gray color. His eyes had lost their fire. When Danny appeared at the cave entrance, flinched like a wounded animal. "Stay away from me," said. His voice was weak and hoarse. "I know you want to hurt me, just get it over with." Danny looked at the creature who had tried to kill him. He saw fear and shame and despair. He saw someone who had never faced real hardship in his life, who had crumbled the moment things got difficult. He could have walked away. He could have left to suffer. No one would have blamed him. The instructors were watching, and they had seen everything had done. Instead, Danny walked into the cave and sat down across from the. "I'm not going to hurt you," Danny said. "I'm going to help you." "Why?" asked. The word came out like a sob. "Because that's what humans do," Danny said. "We survive, and we help others survive too, even when they don't deserve it." He reached into his pack and pulled out food and water. He built a fire at the cave entrance to keep predators away. He stayed awake through the night while and his companion slept. In the morning, they walked back to camp together. The other students watched in silence as Danny brought their tormentor home. None of them spoke. None of them had words for what they were seeing. A human from a, showing mercy to his enemies. It was the most alien thing they had ever witnessed. The transport pods descended into the jungle at exactly the 72-hour mark. Medical teams rushed out, ready to treat injured students and provide emergency care. They had been preparing for the worst. The monitoring footage had shown them things they could barely believe, and they expected to find chaos and suffering. Instead, they found Danny Carter standing at the center of a well-organized camp, surrounded by 17 healthy students from 6 different species. The medical team stopped and stared. The students were tired but alive. Some were even smiling. They had food in their stomachs and water in their bodies. They had learned things that no classroom could teach them, and they were following the human like he was their leader. Danny stepped forward and gave a full report. He listed every student he had found, described their conditions when he found them, and explained what he had done to help them. He spoke calmly and clearly, without pride or complaint. He did not mention what had done to him. He did not ask for special recognition. The medical teams loaded everyone onto the transport pods and flew them back to the main station. The students were taken to the medical wing for examination. Danny was taken to a separate room and told to wait. He sat alone for 3 hours. During that time, the Academy's faculty council gathered in an emergency session. They reviewed the monitoring footage from the survival exercise. They watched Danny fall into the ravine. They watched him build his camp and hunt for food. They watched him cross the flooded river and save the stranded. They watched him welcome his enemies and show them mercy. The council members were some of the most respected scholars in the galaxy. They had seen students from every known species pass through their academy. They had studied the behaviors and capabilities of intelligent life for centuries. None of them had ever seen anything like Danny Carter. "This changes everything," said one of the council members, a scientist named. "We have completely misunderstood humans. We classified Earth as another member said. We assumed that meant its inhabitants would be brutal and primitive. We were wrong." Not entirely wrong, said. Look at him. He killed a predator with a sharpened stick. He crossed a river that would have drowned any of us. He survived conditions that would have killed most species in hours. He is exactly what a should produce. But he showed mercy, the first member said. He saved the ones who tried to kill him. That is not the behavior of a primitive survival machine. The council fell silent. They watched the footage again, focusing on the moment when Danny found in the cave. They watched him build a fire and share his food. They watched him stay awake through the night to protect someone who had treated him with nothing but cruelty. Perhaps that is also what it produces, said a quiet voice from the head of the table. High Scholar was ancient even by standards. Her skin was pale as paper, and her eyes were deep pools of darkness. She had led the academy for over 200 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She did not speak often, but when she did, everyone listened. Think about what we know of Earth, continued. It is a world where everything is trying to kill everything else. The weather, the diseases, the animals, even the other humans. They have been fighting for survival since before they had language. She stood and walked slowly to the window that looked out over the academy grounds. And yet they did not become monsters. They built civilizations. They created art and music and philosophy. They developed codes of honor and systems of justice. They learned to work together to protect the weak, to show mercy to the fallen. She turned to face the council. Do you understand what that means? They developed compassion not in spite of their world but because of it. On Earth, survival requires cooperation. The lone individual dies. The group survives. Humans learn to care for each other because caring for each other kept them alive. The council members absorbed her words in silence. Bring the human to my office, said. I wish to speak with him myself. An hour later, Danny sat across from the High Scholar in a room filled with artifacts from 1,000 worlds. Ancient weapons hung on the walls. Strange plants grew in crystal containers. Books in languages Danny could not read lined the shelves. Studied him for a long moment before speaking. Do you know why I asked to see you, Danny Carter? I assume it's about what happened in the dome, Danny said. Yes and no, replied. What happened in the dome was remarkable, but it was not surprising, not to me. I have been studying your species since we first made contact with Earth. She activated a holographic display that showed Danny's home planet. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling over mountains and deserts. It looked beautiful from space, peaceful and calm. This is what most species see when they look at your world, said. A pretty blue marble, harmless, unremarkable. The image changed. Now it showed statistics scrolling across the screen. Gravity measurements, temperature extremes, lists of predators and parasites and diseases, volcanic activity, earthquake frequency, hurricane wind speeds. This is what your world actually is, said. A planet that has been trying to kill your species for 200,000 years. And do you know what the most remarkable thing about humans is? Danny shook his head. You won, said. You didn't just survive, you conquered. You took a world of death and turned it into your home. You built cities where there should only be ruins. You created technology while fighting off plagues and ice ages. You reached for the stars while your planet tried to drag you back into the mud. She leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. We thought you were primitive because your world was dangerous. We thought danger made species weak and fearful. We were wrong. Danger made you strong. It made you adaptable. It made you stubborn beyond all reason. Danny did not know what to say. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a kid from Montana who had learned to survive in the wilderness. What happens now? He asked finally. Smiled, and Danny saw something in her expression that he had never seen from any alien before. It was not pity or curiosity or contempt. It was respect. Now we stop underestimating your species, she said. Now we start learning from you. She stood and extended her long, thin hand. Danny looked at it for a moment, confused. Then he understood. She had studied human customs. He shook her hand, and something shifted in the universe. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. News of what happened in the survival dome spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By the end of the first day, everyone knew the story. The human exchange student had been attacked by and left for dead. Instead of dying, he had thrived. Instead of seeking revenge, he had saved everyone, including his enemies. Students who had ignored Danny for months now stopped him in the corridors to shake his hand. Professors who had doubted his abilities invited him to speak in their classes. Even his distant and cold roommate began treating him with something that looked like friendship. "I owe you an apology," said one evening as they sat in their room. "I knew what was planning. I should have warned you. I was afraid." Danny looked at him for a long moment. "You were afraid of powerful people. That's not unusual. Just don't let fear make your decisions for you next time." Nodded slowly. "I won't, I promise." The disciplinary hearing for and his companions happened 1 week after the exercise. The Academy's tribunal reviewed the footage and found them guilty of attempted murder, sabotage, and violations of academic conduct. The punishment was severe. They were expelled from the Academy and sent home in disgrace. Their family's political influence could not protect them from evidence that was recorded by 1,000 cameras. Before the sentence was announced, the tribunal asked Danny if he wanted to add anything to the record. Under galactic law, he had the right to demand additional punishment. He could have asked for prison time. He could have destroyed his future completely. Danny stood before the tribunal and spoke clearly. "Where I come from, we believe in second chances," he said. "Made a mistake, a serious mistake, but he's young and young people make bad decisions sometimes. I don't want to ruin his life. I want him to learn from this and become better." The tribunal members exchanged confused glances. They had never seen a victim show mercy at a hearing before. It was not how justice worked in the galaxy. "Are you certain?" the head tribunal member asked. "You have every right to demand harsher punishment." "I'm certain," Danny said. "Let him go home. Let him think about what he did. That's punishment enough." Was sitting in the defendant's area, his scales still dull from his ordeal in the jungle. When Danny spoke, he looked up with something like shock on his face. He had expected hatred. He had expected revenge. He did not understand what he was receiving instead. As the hearing ended and the room emptied, approached Danny. He moved slowly, like he was walking toward something dangerous. "Why?" asked. His voice was quiet and broken. "I tried to kill you. I would have let you die without a second thought. Why would you speak for me?" Danny considered the question. "Because being cruel doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. Real strength is choosing to help when you could hurt, choosing to build when you could destroy, choosing mercy when everyone would understand revenge." He put his hand on shoulder. The flinched but did not pull away. "Go home," Danny said. "Think about who you want to be, and maybe someday you'll understand why I did what I did." Did not respond. He turned and walked away, his head bowed. Danny watched him go and felt no anger, no satisfaction, no regret. He felt only hope that somewhere inside the bully was a better person waiting to emerge. The months that followed changed everything at Academy. Danny continued his studies, but he was no longer just a student. He was a symbol. He represented something that the galaxy had not expected from humans: strength without cruelty, survival without selfishness, power without the desire to dominate. More human exchange students began arriving at academies across the galaxy. Each one carried the same quiet resilience that Danny had shown. They adapted to environments that should have killed them. They learned skills faster than anyone expected. They faced challenges with calm determination. And everywhere they went, they helped others. A human student at the Science Institute saved 3 researchers from a laboratory fire by carrying them to safety through smoke and flames. A human cadet at the military academy led her unit through a training exercise that had never been completed before. A human diplomat on the neutral station of Prime negotiated a peace treaty between two species that had been at war for centuries. The galaxy began to understand what had realized. Humans were not dangerous because they came from a deadly world. They were dangerous because they had learned to thrive in a deadly world. They had been shaped by hardship into something remarkable. They were survivors in the truest sense of the word. Danny graduated from academy with the highest honors the institution could offer. He was offered positions at universities and research stations across the galaxy. Governments wanted him as an advisor. Corporations wanted him as a consultant. Everyone wanted a piece of the human who had become a legend. But Danny had different plans. He returned to Earth briefly, spending 2 weeks with his family in Montana. He hiked through the mountains he had grown up in. He swam in the rivers that had taught him to be strong. He sat on his parents' porch and watched the sun set behind the peaks. His mother asked him what he was going to do next. "I'm going back to the academy," Danny said. "They offered me a teaching position." "Teaching what?" his father asked. Danny smiled. "Survival training." 6 months later, Danny Carter stood in front of his first class at Academy. The room was filled with students from dozens of species. Some of them were nervous. Some of them were excited. All of them were looking at him with respect that he had not asked for but had certainly earned. He wrote one sentence on the display board behind him. "There is no such thing as a hopeless situation." "This is the most important lesson I can teach you," Danny said. "No matter how bad things get, no matter how impossible the odds seem, there is always something you can do. There is always a way to survive. You just have to be willing to find it." A student raised her hand. She was a young, barely old enough to be at the academy. "Is it true what they say about you?" she asked. "That you were left for dead and saved everyone anyway?" Danny nodded. "It's true." "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you stay calm when everything was against you?" Danny thought about the question for a moment. He thought about the ravine and the jungle and the flooded river. He thought about its cruelty and its wisdom. He thought about all the moments when giving up would have been easy and right. "I'm human," he said simply. "We don't know how to quit. It's not in our nature. When the universe pushes us down, we get back up. When it tells us something is impossible, we find a way. When it tries to kill us, we survive." He smiled at his students, at the future of a galaxy that was only beginning to understand what humanity could offer. "And now I'm going to teach you how to do the same." The class began. And across the stars, the galaxy watched as humans took their place among the civilized species, not as primitives to be, but as survivors to be respected. Survivors, the toughest teachers the universe had ever known.